I've been wanting to build a dedicated Killer Instinct fight stick for quite some time, and after seeing this one that Glacius XL made on his page, I decided to give it a go. I didn't have the tools needed to build one from scratch, so what I did was went on Facebook Marketplace and searched for something that might do the trick. I came across this one for only $15. It was pretty much perfect with the lid and the dimensions being 15.75 by 11 by 4.75 inches. So to build this, I needed 8 or 9 buttons, mounting hardware, an IL Euro stick, Brook universal fighting board, necessary wiring harness, a 29mm Forstner bit, a centering jig, and a USB through. I downloaded this template from Glacius XL's page. I modified mine slightly to make it work for my box. Here it just shows me centering it in the position I wanted it. Once I had my template taped into place, I just used a screw to mark where I'd be drilling with the Forstner bit. I used this extra Lexan from my Killer Instinct arcade machine to accurately mark where the player 1 start button would be. I decided to take the 2 buttons from the template and add them to the back side of the controller. This way I wouldn't accidentally be hitting the buttons while playing. Once I marked the centers on these 2 buttons, it was almost time for the next step. So this is where your 29mm Forstner bit comes into play. This works with just any standard drill. Very easy to use. You just line up that center sharp point with where you marked your hole and just start drilling slow to begin with to kind of break into the wood. And then once you've kind of gotten into it a bit, you can speed up a bit and it'll rip right through. I suggest putting a board on the back side of where you're drilling, otherwise you get a little bit of blowout, which I did on mine. I didn't mind much because it would be on the inside of the lid and you wouldn't really see it anyhow. Because the lid of this box had a bit of a rounded bevel to it, I used this technique I learned from the Wicked arcade to add some Bondo to create a false edge all the way around the top of the box. This would allow me later to apply the CPO artwork and have a nice smooth edge to cut along. It's quite easy to do this. All you do is tack cardboard around the edge where you're going to be applying the Bondo so it's nice and tight. Lay it on pretty thick, and then later on you'll sand it down. I also had a hole in the side of the box, which is what you see there. I just covered that with some Bondo as well. Once I got all the cardboard removed, I decided to go with a hand sander for this project. I figured it would be better to use something a little more delicate when working on those edges. I started with a 240 grit sandpaper and eventually worked my way down to 320 grit. This worked well for the project. As you can see, I ended up with a nice clean edge here, and this would work well for cutting later on. I also forgot to drill a hole for the USB through. I needed a separate Forstner bit, 24mm for that. One quick hole and then on to the next. For the CPO design art, I started with a 29mm circle in Illustrator, imported it into Photoshop and resized my photo of the top of my box once I had the holes drilled. I then dropped the template from Glacius XL on and resized it to fit the holes properly. This would serve as my main template for the Killer Instinct artwork. So I already had everything separated out into layers from the original Killer Instinct scan. From there I created a new file that matched the size of my box lid and started laying out the elements there. You can see me using the photo template as well as the guides from Glacius XL to make sure everything was aligned properly. So for paint, I went with Rust-Oleum's 2X semi-gloss black with primer. This stuff was super easy to use. I ended up doing 2 coats. After the first coat, I let it dry for about 35 minutes, just so it was a little bit tacky, and then I applied my second coat. I decided to paint the inside of the box too and the back side of the lid just to keep it all looking nice and clean. Once I was done, I let it dry for 24 hours just to get rid of that paint smell and to make sure it was 100% dry. To remove the joystick from the IL Eurostick, you got to push down on this white nylon actuator, and then you can use a small screwdriver to pull the E-clip out, and this will allow everything to come apart. This is a 3D printed centering jig I bought off Etsy. I'll put a link in the description. What it does is hold the stick perfectly center in your drilled hole, and that'll allow you to line up the backside to get your holes aligned for drilling. This made everything so much easier than it would have been without it. Definitely recommend buying one. Once I had everything lined up, I just used a silver Sharpie marker to mark where the holes would be that I drill for the hardware. So I put a little bit of masking tape on my drill bit just to show how deep I can go into the wood. This will prevent me from drilling all the way through and ruining the project. Highly recommend doing this step. 4 quick drilled holes and then on to mounting the joystick. So once I had everything aligned, it was just a matter of screwing in the mounting hardware using some washers. To put the E-clip back on, it's the same thing. You just push down on the white nylon actuator and clamp it shut with some pliers, and it should snap right into place. I decided to do this step first before applying the artwork just to make sure everything was working, and everything worked perfectly. So rather than spend 2 hours crimping on all these connections and doing the wiring myself, I went ahead and went to arcadeshock.com and bought the 20-pin wiring harness and the 0.187 to 5-pin conversion harness for the stick. This made things much easier. Everything is color coordinated for which kick buttons, the punch buttons, the directional buttons, your start, home, all the buttons you can use. It made things 100 times easier than it would have been doing it myself. Just make sure you get the right size for your buttons. Sanwa uses a smaller connection point, so pay attention to that. I'll put a link to the wiring harnesses I purchased in the description as well. I ordered my custom artwork through GameOnGraphics.com. The vinyl is super thick and has a nice textured surface. It should last a long time. For installation, I actually used one of my LED panels and placed it inside the box to backlight through the holes so I would be able to see exactly where the artwork would line up. After getting everything aligned, I taped everything into place, cut off a little bit of the backing paper and applied it, and from there it's pretty much smooth sailing. You just apply a little bit at a time using the squeegee and pull the backing paper off as you go. There's no way to get air bubbles with this. Just take your time and make sure you're pushing along as you go. Once the art was secure and in place, I just grabbed a modeling knife or utility blade, whatever you have around. Make sure it's brand new. But this just slid nice and smooth along that edge I created with the Bondo. I did it kind of rough to start and then went around and cleaned up the edges after, but this step was very easy to do and I'm very happy with how everything turned out. For cutting the holes, you don't have to be too precise here either. I just went in through from the back and cut around. If it's a little bit rough, don't worry about it because the edge of the buttons is going to cover that anyway once you install those. but that said, it was very easy to cut. Once I was done cutting all the holes and applying the artwork, the last step was just dropping the buttons back in and then reattaching all the wiring that I had done previously. All in all, putting this project together was super fun. Having a dedicated fight stick for playing Killer Instinct on Xbox makes a world of difference. If you game on Xbox and play fighting games, I highly recommend you build one of these out. Make sure you check out Glacius XL for his building plans, or drop a comment if you have any questions about mine. Thank you for checking out the vid. Later.